Hi and welcome to this demo of integrating VSI 8.0 with Dell EMC XtremIO. What I'm going to show you today is the newly released VSI 8.0 Vcenter plugin. What's new about it is the fact that it's the first Vcenter plugin from our portfolio that supports the VMware Html5 Ui, as opposed to the classic web UI that VSI 7.x is currently supporting. So the first thing we need to do is to get the OVA installation VM, which encapsulates the VSI plugin itself, and you need to download it from support.emc.com. Just look for VSI 8.0. Once you've downloaded the OVA, we want to deploy it to an ES6 server. So you have two options to do it. You can either deploy directly from within the Vcenter UI, or you can deploy directly on an ES6 server. In my case, I'm going to deploy directly from an ES6 server UI, but of course you can just do it directly from within the Vcenter UI. So in order to do it, I'm going to the Virtual Machine tab, create register a VM, deploy a virtual machine from an OVF, click the next button, locate the actual file itself, open it, give this a name. I normally give the VSI VM a name that represents the version that it's running, so that's 8.0. Click the next button, select the data store that I want to deploy to, agree with the license agreement, click the next button, and select the network that I'm going to use, thinly provision disk VM, and yes, let's power it up once it's been configured. The additional settings that we need to configure are the network IP address and the vCenter IP or DNS and the credentials for this vCenter. So let's start with the IP addresses. We can also enable or disable SSH. For security reasons you can disable it, but just for the sake of simplicity I actually enable SSH on the appliance itself. The next step is to give it the vCenter details and credentials. And once we configure that, we can click the next button and we are ready to complete. At this stage, the OVA will actually be deployed. You can see the VM is being created and the OVA file is being copied to the data store and actually being deployed. So we're going to continue once the VM is up and running, and I'll show you how to register it within vCenter. You can see the OVA is being configured. And it's actually running the Photon OS, so it's super lightweight and super quick relatively to previous version of the VSI plugin. Once the OVA is configured itself, you can now log into the Vcenter Html5 Ui. And as you can see, it lets you know that the new plugin has been registered and that you need to refresh the browser in order to enable it. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to refresh the browser. And now if we go back to menu, we can see that we have a new tab called Dell EMC VSI. So let's walk over it. And by the way, this is important because in the previous versions, we had to log into the old OVA itself and reconfigure the registration from within the VM. We don't need to do it anymore. It's one of the benefits of the new plugin. Everything can be done directly from within vCenter once you give it the IP address of the OVA itself. So the first thing you want to do is see that it's actually connected to vCenter, and it is because we can see the green mark here. That's the overview dashboard that you can see for VSI. And indeed, if I click it, which is what I'm going to do now, you can see that it's been registered with this username. Everything to do with permission has been completely revised from the old version. Now permission in order to do things on the storage array are done based on vCenter users, which can of course be Active Directory users. There's no need to create a specific user for that OVA that will be able to do things to the storage array. So since vCenter is already registered, because that's what the OVA does, once you configure it, we want to register a new storage system. So let's register a new XtremIO X2 array. And you can see that we also support some other arrays here. So let's go to XtremIO array. Let's add an X2 array. We'll use the admin username and password and click the next button. Now it's adding the array itself. We can see it found it's an X2 array and its IP address. Click the next button. And now comes the interesting part. Which user should be able to do things from a vCenter perspective on that storage array? Tasks such as creating volume, destroying a volume, and things of that nature can be done directly from within vCenter. There's no need to create a specific storage user. Just go with what you want. So in my case, I'm going to give the domain admins some privilege here. So everything to do with which is a domain administrator in my domain, I want it to be able to do things to the storage array because it's very likely to be an admin on the vSphere environment as well. Your mileage may vary. Please consult with your team which user should be able to do storage related tasks from within vCenter. Once that is done, I'm going to click the next button, get a summary screen, click the finish button here, and that's about it. So now you can see the storage system has been refreshed, and if we scroll down, we can actually see which array is being used, and we can view the capacity that's being consumed by that array. Very low capacity is currently being assumed and consumed, which is why we don't see a lot here. I've also added another array here, which has a little bit more physical and logical capacity utilized, so we can see it's XBrick DRM1631. And the first thing I'm going to do is going to see what viewing capabilities does this plugin allows me to do on that specific array. So in order to do that, let's go to a volume that resides on an X2 array that we configure the VSI plugin to talk to. And if we scroll down here to the right, we can see it will let me know that it's indeed is hosted on a specific XtremIO X2 array. That's the volume name at the volume side, which happens to have the same VMFS name. So let's click on the View Details tab. Once we do that, we can view very good information that otherwise we could not have viewed, especially not from within Vcenter. So the basic stuff are things like what's the size of the provision volume and how much logical capacity is being consumed. By new to X2 are also the ability to calculate how much physical capacity is consumed by that array and what's the data reduction for that specific volume, which is very useful. One of the most common questions that we get from our customers is the ability to know this information from within Vcenter. And before VSI, you could not have seen it, and now you can. So indeed, if we go to the array itself, which is that specific volume, we can see that the logical capacity here is actually matching the logical capacity here, and exactly the same, the physical capacity, and exactly the same for the data reduction ratio, which is we can see here. So that's the first immediate value out of using the VSI plugin, even if you're not going to use it for other specific operations. And as such, let's talk about the other operations. The second most important value of the plugin is to apply ES6i host practices, best practices directly from within Vcenter. All of those tweaks around Xcopy block size, queue depth, and so on and so forth. So in order to do it, you can either click at the cluster level side, the ES6 cluster, or on a specific ES6. I'm actually going to do it at the cluster level. Right click it, Dell EMC VSI action, and apply host best practices. This will now show me all the best practices that are possible to be applied for that specific cluster. And I can be very picky about the best practices settings that I want to apply, either select them all. Now, the ability to be very picky about the settings that you want to apply are derived from the fact that maybe this cluster, E6 cluster, is connected to more than just array, one specific array, which is why you can be very selective. So for example, let's say that it's also connected to a Unity array, which requires a different setting for the queue depth. And you cannot apply that specific setting across a specific volume. So maybe it's a wide setting volume, so you want to be picky about the lowest common denominator of the setting that you want to apply. However, in my case, this entire cluster is connected only to an XtremIO array, so I'm probably going to select all of the settings and just click the Save button, and also these new settings that are do with other settings such as round robin, etc. Click the Save button, and those will basically be applied in some cases after the E6 will be rebooted, because some of the settings require reboot of the E6 host itself. And that's it. Once you do that, you are good to go with all those specific, and as you can see, there are many good best practices that will make your E6 cluster work in the best possible way from a performance and an HA perspective against an XtremIO X1 or X2 array. The last feature that I'm going to show that is working with VSI 8.0 is the ability to actually provision a volume from an XtremIO cluster. So in order to do it, again, it's very simple. It can be done at the E6 level or the cluster level. I'm going to do it from the cluster level. Right-click that E6 cluster that I want to provision that volume from. Dell EMC VSI action, new data store. I'm going to select VMFS based on VMFS version 6, and I'm only going to create one volume, so there's no need to click the Create Multiple Data Store. Click the Next button. Give that volume a name. Let's call it temp 0001. Click the Next button, select the same XMS that I want to provision that volume from. So in this case, it's XBrick DRM1631. Click the Next button, select the initiator groups that I want to be mapped to that specific volume. click the next button. The size of the volume, let's give it a size of, I don't know, 550 gig. Some other best practices such as space reclamation, granularity, and the priority of space reclamation. Let's click high, click the next button, and that's it. I'm now ready to complete, so I'm going to click the finish button. Now let's go to that specific array and see if that volume has been created for me. So as you can see, the volume has already been created on the array, and it's already mapped, have been mapped to those two ES6 servers that I've asked it to be mapped, and it will be followed by formatting of that specific volume, which will be done automatically for you to a VMFS data store that I asked it to do as well. So if we go to the data store tab under the source ES6 cluster that I've asked this volume to be formatted for, we can see that it's indeed has been created. So a very efficient way to create volumes and to format them as data store directly from within the vCenter plugin. Thank you for watching.